Today, every day, small cap investors visit Agoracom knowing this is the day to discover the world's next great company, to have their dreams come true. That's why I take to the open road, to find them, to tell their stories, to engage them, to bring them to life, because they want to connect with you from your office, your phone, your home, anywhere. Agoracom, find your dream.
Welcome to Beyond the Press Release, a production of Agoracom, in which we take the time to speak with small cap executives right after recent important news. With us today for the first time as a CEO of Northbud Farms, but not for the first time ever, Ryan Brown, CEO at Northbud, just started trading on the CSE in Canada on the stock symbol NBUD, Northbud. Now, for those of you who knew the story, that's going to be almost all of you, Northbud acquired a late-stage ACMPR applicant, that's GrowPro's MMP from Tetra Biopharma. That application is currently in confirmation of readiness stage. The company already has a phase 1 project located on 95 acres of agricultural farmland in Quebec. The facility is going to focus on GMP, that's higher production grade, farmer grade cultivation, and food grade extracted inputs. I know that's a mouthful. Ryan's going to talk about that. But more than just lip service, they're currently working with multiple food, beverage, and science companies to provide safe, standardized, cannabinoids-infused raw inputs for large-scale GMP manufacturing. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me, George.
Hey, congratulations on your listing. Oh, we're wishing you all the best because you just came on. But this isn't your first. Before we get into Northbud, this isn't your first rodeo when it comes to cannabis states in the CSE. You've already had some great success in the past.
Yeah, no, this is my, this will be the second time that I'm kind of behind the wheel of a publicly traded company. My industry experience so goes back to the early 2000s. Although we are a startup company, we definitely have a track record in the space, and we look to build on that with Northbud.
All right, so let's talk about that. I gave a summary overview of the company. I want you to take us into a bit of a deeper dive because it's amazing how we're starting to see divergence into companies who are trying to do value-added things now. Just a year ago, people wanted to grow, cut, sell, and already the value add is growing. You're going after it. Give us a little more layman but detailed overview about what you're doing in Northbud.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the strategy that we're implementing is we believe that as the industry continues to expand, similar to what you saw during the high-tech boom, where you had a few major companies that were really pushing the envelope of, in that case, development. In our case, it's product segments, the continued disruption of multiple existing industries, be it alcohol, tobacco, pharma. And as these companies push that envelope and really, break new ground, it creates a lot of opportunities for smaller, focused companies to fill in some of those gaps. The big, the next lead up after recreational legalization is going to be the legalization of edibles. This is another opportunity for companies to really focus on one or two elements of the supply chain and really establish a niche value in that supply chain rather than trying to be, for example, the next Ford Motor Company. We would rather be the company that makes really good brake pads or really good spark plugs that all of the big guys use to further their processes and make their business model maybe a little bit more efficient by relying on companies that really focus on these gaps that are going to be created when you've got an industry that's developing at the speed of the cannabis industry, which is, 1 week in the cannabis space is like 6 months in every other industry.
Yeah, and there are going to be a lot of gaps, that's for sure, right? Because this industry is going to grow and pretty much cover almost everything when it comes to beverage products and so on and so forth. Let me talk about margin for a second, because one big concern we've always heard on the again, the growing, cutting, selling side is the margins are going to get compressed. It's going to become a commodity. The infused side hasn't even started. I think it's got a long way to go. What are margins looking like over there?
Oh, margins based on the cost analysis that we've done, taking existing kind of gray market edible pricing into account, factoring in even retail LP prices on oils and derivatives, we believe that the multiples are going to be significantly higher than what you see with just a dry flower market. What we've done is we've spent a lot of time examining other markets, particularly in the US over the last 8 months, to really see where the margins were, which companies were making the highest margins, and really focusing on these value add elements of the supply chain in what amounts to be a much more sophisticated and developed retail market than we have in Canada right now, or than we're going to see in Canada for probably the next year to 18 months as everything unfolds. So we're able to leverage some of this know-how and leverage some of our relationships to really position ourselves where we know gaps are going to be formed before those gaps even exist.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second before we get into today's press release. But there's something to be said for you hearing, you hear a mega beverage companies, mega food companies are trying to get into this industry. And I know you gave the brake pad analogy versus Ford Motors, but is there an intimidation factor there at all that you are a smaller company or startup and you're going after some, a space that right now is being dominated by bigger key players?
I think that, to use the word dominated, for example, if you look at the distribution of medical cannabis under the ACMPR, you've got some of the smaller to mid-sized companies that are actually more profitable than a lot of these big guys. And until the large companies can really achieve those efficiencies that are not necessarily the same as you see in traditional manufacturing, I think that there's going to be a real opportunity to be a small to mid-size, profitable, efficient company that provides returns to its investors and its shareholders, really focused on niche markets that are and gaps that are going to be created within this existing space. You see a lot of companies now that are bringing on food and beverage executives. I mean, that's great, but we focused on food scientists, on bringing in, I call them my food ninjas, people that understand flavor masking, understand what a product needs and how a product needs to be developed before you even infuse cannabis into it. You can't just take an off-the-shelf juice or a beverage or a cookie or a brownie and expect to infuse cannabis into that in any sort of standardized form and be compliant, number one, from a regulatory point of view, because you can assume that the regulations around food and beverage is going to be extremely stringent. You've got two super regulated industries, cannabis and food, that are going to be married together. And so we're assuming that it's going to be highly regulated, that you're going to see, milligram per serving caps. You're going to see milligram per dose caps, and us being able to figure out ways to achieve these efficiencies on a micro scale, and then be able to work with, be it a producer who's sitting on 1 million square feet of production space, realizing that the product they're producing isn't conducive to the dry flowered or even the smokable oil market. A typical line from the industry is, B grade input gets you B grade output. So if you're growing a commodity crop, expecting to be able to transfer that into other smokable or consumables, there's going to be a learning curve, and I think the companies are going to be really surprised at the lack of market penetration that some of these products are going to have compared to what the traditional cannabis consumer has become accustomed to. And so for us, that's an opportunity.
So you're going to be focused more on specific products? Is that do you want to become a product company today, or do you want to become more of the technology, infused technology? Because I'm going to read the headline today. Northbud Farm announces licensing of cannabinoids infusion technology for food and beverage platform. So which one are you going to be focusing on more?
Ultimately, I think it's going to be an evolution. For us, certainly we would be interested in having our own Northbud brand of edibles and consumables that would be sold through the distribution channels. But before you can do that, you need to dial in your technology. You need to figure out how to create a standardized input that can blend with, be it an edible, a beverage, a capsule, any consumable where taste becomes an issue. It's not as easy as taking distillate or extract and putting it in a doser and putting it into a cookie and expecting to sell that to the market. And so what we focused on, particularly with the agreement that we made with Made by Science, is focusing on manufacturing taste neutral ingredients that will contain high levels of cannabinoids, allowing you to create for example, a 10 milligram cookie using 0.001 gram of a protein-based powder as your input. That's got taste masking compounds blended with that. So you're really not altering the end product. So your chocolate chip cookie with no cannabis will taste exactly the same as your chocolate chip cookie without cannabis. Focusing on other things like the relationship between THC and caffeine, THC and alcohol. We know you're not going to be able to mix those two together. So focusing on creating, for example, a chocolate chip without caffeine in it that can be implemented into an edible. Creating wines, creating other spirits that have no alcohol in them. And not just removing the alcohol because you affect the molecular composition of the product, of actually brewing spirits and creating wine with no alcohol in it so that it becomes we call it a vehicle that's conducive to infusion. But that all starts with an ingredient. And you see some companies that are taking the approach of creating, cannabis-infused sugar. There's different other powdered products available out there that are starch-based. Well, starch has a taste. Starch is temperature sensitive. Sugar is an integral component and ingredient in a variety of recipes. So now you've got to marry your cannabinoid content to the sugar content of your recipe. And that's going to be highly problematic from a large-scale manufacturing point of view. So what we're focusing on is creating neutral ingredients that would be approved as a food-grade ingredient that allows us to infuse cannabinoids into food products without altering the end product or that taste that customers have become accustomed to eating the non-infused or consuming the non-infused version of those products.
Ryan, I got to tell you something, kind of deviating here from my questions. If people didn't know it, or they didn't believe it with respect to your history in this space and how long you've been doing things, and this is your second go around, that last 120 seconds pretty much summed up your expertise and your knowledge there. Because my family's in the food service industry. They're manufacturers of edible oils, believe it or not, canola oils and margarines and things like that. And it's a very complicated business, right? For so many reasons. You've got molecules, you've got regulations, and in 120 seconds or however long that last answer was, man, you really know your stuff. And that should give people at home a lot of confidence that you're not just Ryan and a couple of guys getting together to see if we can grab some infusion technology and get some muffins and cookies out there to make a quick buck. Man, I was really impressed by that. Hats off to you that you brought your knowledge that far.
No, I appreciate that. I think it shows one of the values within our kind of our Northbud family of companies is we do have a venture capital wing, and our venture capital wing focuses on investing in startup companies. So we have a lot of exposure to companies, to technologies, to businesses that are not kind of in the public sphere yet. And so we're able to kind of pick and choose not only through Northbud Capital from our investment portfolio, which is a Northbud Capital being a private company, but then also being able to leverage some of those relationships for Northbud Farms, for our cannabis-focused company, to integrate those technologies and integrate those partners into our business development plan moving forward. So although Northbud has only been listed for a week and we only incorporated the company 8 months ago, we've been working on this for going on about a year and a half now.
Last question, Made by Science, the company that you acquired this licensing technology, this technology where you license it from, they're pretty successful down the U.S. as well. Tell us a little bit about why you partnered with them, why you announced this licensing for this technology from them.
Well, when we looked at the space, we wanted to surround ourselves with people that were really focused on the food science aspect. So what Made by Science was Made by Science was a company that acquired a variety of different intellectual property from both the food industry as well as other established industries, and converted or modified that technology for the use of infusing cannabis or cannabinoids into food. So they really took the food first approach, whereas a lot of companies are, hey, we're a cannabis company. We've got a bunch of cannabis. Let's make some food. We wanted to go to the source, to the root, which is going to be the companies that are focused on the food aspect and the integration of cannabis into food, as opposed to integrating your food into the cannabis as opposed to integrating cannabis into food. And it's a completely different approach. These guys, they're not growers, they're not extractors, they're literally focused on nothing more than the technology behind creating consistent, compliant, safe food products that contain both THC and CBD.
I think we'll sum it up there, because we covered a lot of territory. You're just newly listed, and I'm presuming, and by the way, I'm not taking words out of your mouth or putting words in your mouth, sorry, but I presume you're going to have more news coming out throughout 2018. Quickly, what should we be looking for out of North Bud for the rest of 2018 and maybe even a little beyond that? What next steps for you?
I think the next step for us is to continue to expand on our food ingredients and our infused food ingredients department. We're going to continue to bring on more staff, more team members that have experience from the food and beverage industry, but not necessarily at the executive level from the product development point of view. And I also I think another important thing moving forward is the reason why we focused on food right now is because we believe that food and pharma, from a compliance point of view and from an input point of view, there's a lot of synergies. So as we build our cultivation facility around the standards required for pharmaceutical development, we believe that we're going to be able to quickly bridge that over to the food industry as well. So food and pharma are really the two aspects that we're focused on as we continue to build both our cultivation space as well as our value-added services and other elements that we can introduce into the cannabis industry.
Well, it sounds like that's a big task, and it is. But given the fact that you and your team, this is your second time around with respect to a public company, had great success the first time with Grow Pros. We're looking to seeing you achieve some great success, having you back on here and talk about that in the weeks and months to come.
Looking forward to it. Thanks a lot.
You've been watching Ryan Brown. He's CEO at North Bud Farms. The company trades on the stock symbol NBUD on the CSE. If you want more information about the company, you can look them up on the web naturally, or for investors who want everything summarized because you're in a rush and you don't have all the time in the world, get to Agoracom, read the profile information we've got there, some of the other collateral information we've got for you, get caught up to speed, and post your questions because Ryan and Edward and the team are available for questions online. And to me, that says a lot when a company is newly listed and has made itself accessible online to public questions and to provide everybody with the answers. So make sure you take advantage of that as well. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Do your due diligence on North Bud, and we'll see you next time.